Rediscover your past by digitizing your family's memories with LEGACYBOX. Watch until the end of this video to find out more about preserving your legacy, and then visit legacybox.com/recollection. In 1951, the future of America was arriving fast. Televisions flickered in more and more living rooms, with new sitcoms becoming standard viewing. This is also the year that giant computers began to fill entire rooms, while the fear of nuclear war hung quietly in the background. With a population of 152 million people, the country was entering a decade that would soon redefine modern American culture. On January 1st, broadcaster Paul Harvey launched his nationally syndicated radio program, Paul Harvey News and Comment, beginning a decades-long run as one of America's most recognizable radio voices. By January 15th, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that speech creating a clear and present danger of inciting violence or riots was not protected under the Constitution, reinforcing limits on free speech during a tense political climate. On February 1st, the United States conducted a nuclear test at the new Nevada test site, and the explosion became the first atomic detonation ever broadcast live on television. Founded on February 21st, the first Jack in the Box restaurant opened in California, introducing a new fast food concept built around ordering from an intercom and pulling up to a drive-through window. Just days later, on February 27th, the 22nd Amendment to the U.S. Constitution was officially ratified, limiting future presidents to just 2 elected terms. Comic strip history was made on March 12th. That's when Hank Ketchum's Dennis the Menace debuted in newspapers across America, quickly becoming a favorite among young readers. A series of mysterious New York City bombings began on March 29th, when a homemade explosive device detonated inside Grand Central Terminal. Authorities would later discover the attacks were the work of the so-called Mad Bomber. That same day, March 29th, Julius and Ethel Rosenberg were convicted of espionage for passing atomic secrets to the Soviet Union during World War II. This was one of the most controversial Cold War cases in American history. On April 11th, President Harry Truman shocked the nation by firing General Douglas MacArthur from command in Korea after disagreements over strategy. Future Yankees legend Mickey Mantle hit his first career home run on May 1st, beginning one of baseball's most celebrated careers. By May 15th, American Telephone and Telegraph Company, or AT&T, became the first American corporation to surpass 1 million shareholders, reflecting the rapid growth of post-war investing. On June 14th, the U.S. Census Bureau unveiled UNIVAC 1, the first commercially produced electronic digital computer in America. Though enormous and powered by thousands of vacuum tubes, it helped pave the way for modern computing. CBS aired the first color TV program on June 25th, a music special titled Premiere, hosted by Arthur Godfrey. The program was broadcast to several East Coast CBS stations. The J.D. Salinger novel, The Catcher in the Rye, was published on July 16th, a novel that became one of the most influential and debated books of the 20th century. On July 28th, the Walt Disney Company released the animated feature film Alice in Wonderland, bringing the Lewis Carroll fantasy story to life. Television comedy took a step forward on October 5th. That's when Jackie Gleason introduced bus driver Ralph Cramden to America in the very first Honeymooners sketch. Only 10 days later, on October 15th, I Love Lucy premiered on CBS, revolutionizing sitcom production and becoming one of the most beloved shows in TV history. On October 17th, CBS introduced its famous I logo, one of the most recognizable symbols in broadcasting history. Baseball icon Joe DiMaggio announced his retirement on December 11th, ending a legendary Hall of Fame career with the New York Yankees. And as the year closed on December 31st, the Marshall Plan, which started in 1948, officially expired after distributing more than $13 billion to help rebuild Europe following World War II. In 1952, America seemed to be moving in two directions at once. The country was settling into the comfort of the post-war boom, but Cold War fears lingered. With a population of roughly 157 million people, the baby boom continued, and Americans watched a year unfold with mixed optimism as pop culture quickly reshaped society. On January 14th, The Today Show premiered on NBC, becoming one of the longest-running TV programs in American history. The show helped establish the format for modern morning news programming. By February 6th, Princess Elizabeth became Queen Elizabeth II, following the death of her father, King George VI. This began a reign that would span generations. On March 21st, thousands of excited teenagers packed into the Cleveland Arena for what is often considered the first major rock and roll concert, the Moondog Coronation Ball, organized by disc jockey Alan Freed. The crowd became so large that the event had to be shut down early. Moviegoers flocked to theaters on March 27th, when Singin' in the Rain premiered in New York City. Starring Gene Kelly and Debbie Reynolds, the musical would later be regarded as one of the greatest films ever made. On March 29th, President Harry Truman stunned many Americans by announcing he would not be seeking another term as president. By April 28th, General Dwight D. Eisenhower resigned as Supreme Commander of NATO, preparing for an upcoming presidential campaign. Television advertising changed forever on April 30th. That's when Mr. Potato Head became the first toy ever promoted in a TV commercial. An early glimpse of artificial intelligence appeared on May 19th, when Time magazine featured Theseus, an experimental electronic learning machine that included a mechanical mouse created by mathematician Claude Shannon. On June 2nd, President Truman returned control of the nation's steel mills following a Supreme Court ruling. 560,000 United Steelworkers immediately went on strike, which would continue for 53 days. By July 3rd, Puerto Rico's constitution had been approved by Congress, paving the way for the island to become a self-governing U.S. Commonwealth later that month. On July 11th, General Eisenhower officially became the Republican nominee for president, following nomination in Chicago. He chose Richard Nixon as his running mate. Beginning on July 19th, radar operators and military personnel tracked multiple mysterious unidentified objects over Washington, D.C. The incident lasted a week and became one of the most famous UFO events in American history. On August 13th, blues singer Big Mama Thornton recorded Hound Dog, a song that would later become even more famous by Elvis Presley. Country music history was made on August 23rd, when Kitty Wells became the first woman to top the Billboard country charts with the song "It Wasn't God Who Made Honky Tonk Angels." Television audiences were introduced to The Adventures of Superman on September 19th. That's when the show premiered in syndication, starring George Reeves as the Man of Steel. That same day, September 19th, actor and filmmaker Charlie Chaplin was barred from re-entering the United States after traveling abroad, amid controversy over his political views. On September 23rd, undefeated heavyweight boxer Rocky Marciano knocked out Jersey Joe Walcott to capture the World Heavyweight Championship. Fast food history was made on September 24th, when the first franchised Kentucky Fried Chicken opened in Salt Lake City, Utah. The Colonel franchised his famous recipe to his friend Pete Harmon. By October 7th, the music television program Bandstand, later called American Bandstand, debuted in Philadelphia, years before Dick Clark would make it nationally famous. Children's literature gained a timeless classic on October 15th, when Charlotte's Web by author E.B. White was first published. The presidential election of November 4th saw Dwight D. Eisenhower defeat Adlai Stevenson in a landslide victory. This result was famously predicted correctly by the early computer UNIVAC 1. Later that month, on November 29th, President-elect Eisenhower traveled to Korea in fulfillment of a campaign promise to personally examine the ongoing war. On December 8th, television broke another barrier when I Love Lucy aired the first American TV episode to openly acknowledge pregnancy as part of a storyline. On December 20th, a U.S. Air Force C-124 Globemaster crashed near Moses Lake in Washington state, killing 86 servicemen. At the time, it was one of the deadliest aviation disasters in American military history. 5 days later, on December 25th, Queen Elizabeth II delivered her first Christmas Day radio broadcast, thanking people throughout the Commonwealth for their loyalty and affection, and pledging to continue the royal holiday tradition for years to come. The United States in 1953 felt like it was racing toward the future, while still holding tight to familiar comforts. Television was now central to family life. Science was unlocking mysteries once thought impossible, and Cold War tensions hovered over nearly everything. With the population approaching 159 million people, Americans witnessed a year filled with breakthroughs, tragedy, and historic firsts. On January 1st, country music legend Hank Williams died suddenly at age 29 from heart failure while riding in the backseat of a car en route to a concert in Ohio. By January 7th, outgoing President Harry Truman publicly announced that the United States had successfully developed the hydrogen bomb, dramatically escalating the nuclear arms race. On January 19th, more than 70% of all television sets in America tuned in to watch I Love Lucy, as Lucy Ricardo gave birth to little Ricky. The show drew a larger audience than the presidential inauguration the following day. A new administration began on January 20th, when Dwight D. Eisenhower delivered the first live, coast-to-coast televised presidential inauguration speeches, signaling television's growing influence in politics. Scientific history was made on February 28th, when researchers James Watson and Francis Crick announced they had identified the double helix structure of DNA. This was aided significantly by the groundbreaking X-ray work of Rosalind Franklin. On March 1st, Soviet leader Joseph Stalin suffered a massive stroke following an overnight gathering with senior officials. The stroke left him partially paralyzed and unconscious until his death 4 days later. By March 19th, the Academy Awards reached a milestone as the ceremony was broadcast on television for the first time, bringing Hollywood glamour directly into American living rooms. A medical breakthrough was achieved on March 26th, when scientist Jonas Salk announced his promising polio vaccine, offering hope against one of the most feared diseases of the time. On April 3rd, the first issue of TV Guide appeared on newsstands, featuring baby Desi Arnaz Jr. on the cover, and it quickly became a staple in television-loving households. April 10th brought us a new way to watch movies, when horror film House of Wax premiered in New York City. Starring Vincent Price, it became the first major 3D film and helped fuel the decade's fascination with gimmick cinema. Disaster struck on May 11th, when a devastating tornado ripped through Waco, Texas, killing 114 people and causing widespread destruction in one of the deadliest tornadoes in state history. History was made on May 29th, when Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay became the first climbers confirmed to reach the summit of Mount Everest. On June 19th, convicted spies Julius and Ethel Rosenberg were executed by electric chair after being found guilty of passing atomic secrets to the Soviet Union. An American icon rolled onto the scene on June 30th. That's when the first Chevy Corvette came off the assembly line in Flint, Michigan. The new model would become one of the nation's most recognizable sports cars. By July 9th, the Bureau of Internal Revenue officially adopted the name Internal Revenue Service, better known simply as the IRS. Music history quietly began on July 18th, when a teenage Elvis Presley paid $3.98 to record a demo at Sun Studio in Memphis, reportedly as a gift for his mother. The fighting in Korea officially ended on July 27th, when an armistice agreement ended active combat in the Korean War, leaving the Korean peninsula divided much as it remains today. On August 19th, a U.S.-backed coup in Iran overthrew their prime minister and restored the Shah, a Cold War move whose effects would echo for decades. A future presidential couple married on September 12th, when Senator John F. Kennedy wed Jacqueline Bouvier in Newport, Rhode Island. By September 30th, Earl Warren had been appointed Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, beginning a transformative era in constitutional law. Commercial air travel expanded on November 29th, when American Airlines became the first commercial airline to offer nonstop transcontinental service across the United States in both directions, from New York to Los Angeles. On December 1st, Hugh Hefner released the very first issue of Playboy magazine. It featured Marilyn Monroe as its first centerfold. Speaking before the United Nations on December 8th, President Eisenhower delivered his famous Atoms for Peace speech, promoting peaceful uses of nuclear energy. And on December 12th, pilot Chuck Yeager pushed aviation even further by reaching Mach 2.43 in the experimental Bell X-1A rocket plane, setting a new milestone in the jet age. The United States in 1954 was beginning to change. Rock and roll was shaking up pop culture, civil rights battles were reshaping the nation, and post-war prosperity continued growing. 161 million Americans were there to witness all the historic events that made up the year 1954. On January 14th, baseball legend Joe DiMaggio married Hollywood icon Marilyn Monroe in what seemed like the perfect American romance. But behind the glamour, tensions soon emerged, and the marriage would unravel before the year was over. By February 23rd, the first mass inoculations using Jonas Salk's polio vaccine took place at an elementary school in Pittsburgh. This marked a turning point against one of the most feared childhood diseases of the era. On March 1st, 4 Puerto Rican nationals opened fire inside the U.S. House of Representatives chamber at the Capitol, wounding 5 congressmen before being subdued by security. History changed on April 12th when Bill Haley and his Comets recorded Rock Around the Clock, a song that many historians view as the spark that pushed rock and roll into mainstream America. Future baseball legend Hank Aaron hit his first major league home run on April 23rd, beginning a career that would eventually make him baseball's all-time home run king. One of the most important civil rights decisions in American history occurred on May 17th, when the Supreme Court issued its unanimous ruling in Brown v. Board of Education, declaring racial segregation in public schools unconstitutional and striking a major blow against Jim Crow laws. During televised Senate hearings on June 9th, attorney Joseph Welch famously confronted Senator Joseph McCarthy with the words, "Have you no decency, sir?" A moment many believe accelerated McCarthy's political downfall. On June 14th, President Eisenhower signed legislation that added the words "under God" to the Pledge of Allegiance. A major moment in music history unfolded on July 5th. That's when producer Sam Phillips recorded an unrehearsed performance of "That's All Right" by Elvis Presley at Sun Studio in Memphis. This accelerated rock and roll into the mainstream. On July 17th, construction officially began on Disneyland in Anaheim, California. The bold and risky project by Walt Disney would soon redefine family entertainment. A landmark book arrived on July 29th when J.R.R. Tolkien published The Fellowship of the Ring, the first volume of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. The second book would soon follow. A new sports magazine hit newsstands on August 16th, when Sports Illustrated debuted. Initially dismissed by some critics, it would grow into one of the most recognizable names in sports journalism. On August 24th, President Eisenhower signed the Communist Control Act of 1954, effectively outlawing the Communist Party in the United States during the height of Cold War fears and McCarthyism. One of the most famous celebrity images in history was captured on September 15th, when Marilyn Monroe's white dress billowed upward over a subway grate during filming for The 7-Year Itch. The moment embarrassed Joe DiMaggio and reportedly deepened tensions that soon ended their marriage. Late-night television began on September 27th. That's when The Tonight Show premiered on NBC, with its first host, Steve Allen. Cold War policy took shape on October 25th, when President Eisenhower pledged U.S. support to South Vietnam, deepening America's involvement in Southeast Asia, years before the Vietnam War escalated. After processing more than 12 million immigrants, Ellis Island officially closed on November 12th, ending an era in which millions of families entered the United States through New York Harbor. The economy reached a symbolic milestone on November 23rd, when the Dow Jones Industrial Average finally closed above its pre-1929 crash peak, signaling renewed confidence following the Great Depression and World War II. On December 1st, the first Hyatt Hotel, called Hyatt House, opened near Los Angeles International Airport, pioneering the airport hotel concept. A fast food giant was born on December 14th, when the first franchised Burger King restaurant opened in Miami, Florida. The original restaurant had opened a year earlier in Jacksonville. And on December 23rd, doctors led by Joseph Murray successfully performed the first kidney transplant between identical twins in Boston, opening the door to a revolution in organ transplants. By 1955, the nation's population had climbed to 165 million people. Suburban neighborhoods were growing, and a new generation of musicians, entertainers, and activists was shaping American culture. 1955 was a year that saw the rise of modern youth culture, and the struggle for civil rights gained ground following a horrific crime. On January 19th, the word game Scrabble officially debuted on the mass market. Originally invented years earlier by architect Alfred Butts during the Great Depression, the game would gradually become one of the best-selling board games in history. making his television debut on March 3rd. A still little-known singer named Elvis Presley appeared on a local broadcast of the popular show Louisiana Hayride. Few viewers could have guessed they were watching the future King of Rock and Roll. A fast food revolution began on April 15th, when Ray Kroc opened the first McDonald's franchise in Des Plaines, Illinois. Kroc's emphasis on consistency, speed, and franchising would transform a small hamburger stand into one of the world's most recognizable businesses. The world lost one of its greatest scientific minds on April 18th, when Albert Einstein died at the age of 76 in Princeton, New Jersey. Einstein's discoveries fundamentally changed humanity's understanding of space, time, and the universe. Television audiences met Kermit the Frog on May 9th, when a young Jim Henson introduced the character during the premiere of Sam and Friends on a Washington, D.C. television station. A new game show arrived on June 7th, when the $64,000 Question premiered on CBS. The program became a ratings sensation and helped launch America's fascination with big-money television game shows. On July 11th, Congress authorized the phrase "In God We Trust" for use on all American currency. During the Cold War, many leaders viewed the motto as a way to distinguish the United States from officially atheist communist governments. On July 17th, Disneyland officially opened in Anaheim, California. Millions watched the opening ceremonies on television as Walt Disney introduced what he called the happiest place on Earth. Disaster struck the Northeast on August 19th, when Hurricane Diane unleashed catastrophic flooding across several states. More than 200 people lost their lives, thousands were left homeless, and damage stretched from North Carolina to New England, and it exceeded $1 billion. The first edition of the Guinness Book of World Records was published on August 27th. Originally intended as a promotional tool for Guinness beer, it quickly became a sensation and one of the best-selling book series ever produced. On August 28th, a 14-year-old African-American boy named Emmett Till was kidnapped, tortured, and murdered in Mississippi after accusations that he had offended a white woman. Photographs of his body shocked the nation, and it helped to energize the growing civil rights movement. Little Richard recorded Tutti Frutti in New Orleans on September 3rd. The song's explosive energy and unforgettable opening lyrics helped define the sound of early rock and roll. Television audiences were introduced to the CBS show Gunsmoke on September 10th. The series would go on to become one of the longest-running and most influential westerns in television history. On September 23rd, an all-white Mississippi jury acquitted Roy Bryant and J.W. Millam of the murder of Emmett Till after only a brief deliberation. Protected from retrial by double jeopardy laws, the two men later admitted their guilt in a paid magazine interview. While vacationing in Colorado on September 24th, President Eisenhower suffered a serious heart attack. The event raised concerns about his health, but ultimately did not prevent him from seeking and winning re-election the following year. Hollywood lost one of its brightest young stars on September 30th, when actor James Dean was killed at age 24 after his Porsche collided with another vehicle in California. His death cemented his status as a cultural icon and symbol of youthful rebellion. Children across America tuned in on October 3rd, when the Mickey Mouse Club premiered on ABC. The program introduced millions of young viewers to the Mouseketeers and became a cornerstone of children's television. Literary history was made on October 7th, when poet Allen Ginsberg publicly read his poem, Howl, at San Francisco's Sixth Gallery. The event became a defining moment for the Beat generation, and is often viewed as an early spark of the counterculture movement that would flourish in the 1960s. On October 15th, a young Texas musician named Buddy Holly impressed a talent scout while opening for Bill Haley and his Comets. A clerical error on his first contract misspelled Holly, but it created one of rock music's most enduring names. The final film starring James Dean, Rebel Without a Cause, premiered on October 27th, less than 1 month after his death. The movie's themes of teenage alienation resonated deeply with young audiences and helped define a generation. Tragedy struck the skies over Colorado on November 1st when a bomb exploded aboard United Flight 629. All 44 people on board were killed, making it one of the deadliest acts of aviation sabotage in American history. On November 22nd, RCA Records purchased Elvis Presley's contract from Sun Records for $35,000. This was a great deal for RCA, and it launched Elvis onto the national stage. The civil rights movement entered a new phase on December 1st, when Rosa Parks was arrested for refusing to surrender her seat to a white passenger on a Montgomery, Alabama bus. Just 4 days later, on December 5th, the historic Montgomery bus boycott began. Led by local activists, including a young pastor named Martin Luther King Jr., the boycott would continue for more than a year and become one of the most significant victories of the civil rights movement. On December 15th, the album Folsom Prison Blues by Johnny Cash was released on Sun Records. The song helped establish Cash's signature sound and outlaw image. And by December 31st, General Motors became the first American corporation to earn more than $1 billion in a single year, a symbol of the nation's booming post-war economy. America entered 1956 at the height of the baby boom. The nation's population was roughly 168 million people, and while rock and roll was exploding in popularity, the civil rights movement was gaining momentum. 1956 was a year full of cultural milestones, celebrity headlines, and even terrible disasters. On January 9th, advice columnist Abigail Van Buren debuted her newspaper feature, Dear Abby. The column quickly became one of the most widely read advice columns in American history. The home of Martin Luther King Jr. was bombed on January 30th. It happened in Montgomery, Alabama, and although his family was unharmed, the attack angered supporters and tested King's commitment to nonviolence. He urged everyone to remain peaceful, helping establish the philosophy that would define the movement. Rock and roll took another step into the mainstream on February 22nd. When Elvis Presley entered the national music charts for the first time with Heartbreak Hotel. The song became his first #1 hit. A real-life fairy tale unfolded on April 19th, when Hollywood actress Grace Kelly married Prince Rainier III of Monaco. The lavish wedding attracted worldwide attention and transformed Kelly from a movie star into royalty. On April 27th, Heavyweight boxing champion Rocky Marciano retired from the sport with a perfect professional record of 49 wins and no losses, a feat that remains unmatched among heavyweight champions. Television viewers first saw NBC's famous peacock logo on May 22nd, a colorful symbol designed to promote the network's growing investment in color broadcasting. One of the defining moments of rock and roll occurred on June 5th, when Elvis Presley performed Hound Dog on The Milton Berle Show. His gyrating hips shocked many older viewers, while simultaneously thrilling younger fans. Cold War patriotism continued to influence American life on June 14th. That's when President Dwight D. Eisenhower authorized the phrase "under God" as part of the official Pledge of Allegiance. An era came to an end on June 25th, when the final Packard automobile rolled off the production line in Detroit. Once considered one of America's premier luxury car brands, Packard could not survive the increasingly competitive post-war auto industry. Another Hollywood marriage made headlines on June 29th, when Marilyn Monroe married playwright Arthur Miller in White Plains, New York. The marriage united two of the most famous figures in American entertainment and literature. Disaster struck the skies on June 30th, when a TWA flight collided with a United Airlines flight over the Grand Canyon. All 128 people aboard the two aircraft were killed, making it the deadliest aviation accident in history at that time. A television institution began on July 9th, when Dick Clark made his first appearance as host of American Bandstand. The show would become one of the most influential platforms for popular music in America. On July 24th, comedy legends Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis performed together for the final time at New York's Copacabana Club, ending one of the most successful comedy partnerships in entertainment history. Just one day later, on July 25th, the Italian ocean liner SS Andrea Doria collided with the Swedish ship Stockholm in heavy Atlantic fog off Nantucket. 51 people died in the accident, but a massive rescue effort saved over 1,600 people before the Andrea Doria sank the following morning. The art world lost one of its most influential painters on August 11th, when Jackson Pollock died at the age of 44 in a car accident near his home in Springs, New York. Pollock was killed when his car left the road and crashed into a tree. Democrats selected their presidential nominee on August 16th, when Adlai Stevenson was chosen to challenge Eisenhower in the upcoming election. Television history was made on September 9th, when Elvis Presley appeared on The Ed Sullivan Show for the first time. More than 60 million Americans tuned in, making it one of the most watched television broadcasts of the decade. Shopping in America changed forever on October 8th, when the nation's first fully enclosed, climate-controlled shopping mall named Southdale Center opened in a Minneapolis suburb. The concept became the model for suburban malls across the country. Chess history was made on October 17th, when 13-year-old Bobby Fischer defeated master Donald Byrne in a match later dubbed the Game of the Century. The victory announced Fischer's arrival as a future world champion. On November 3rd, The Wizard of Oz was televised nationally for the first time on the Ford Star Jubilee. The broadcast was hosted by Burt Lahr, who played the Cowardly Lion in the film, and Judy Garland's 10-year-old daughter, Liza Minnelli. Voters returned Dwight D. Eisenhower to the White House on November 6th, as he defeated Adlai Stevenson in a decisive re-election victory. The biblical epic The Ten Commandments premiered on November 8th, featuring Charlton Heston as Moses. The film became one of the highest-grossing and most enduring productions in Hollywood history. Rock and roll legends gathered unexpectedly on December 4th, when Elvis Presley, Johnny Cash, Jerry Lee Lewis, and Carl Perkins met for an informal recording session at Sun Studio in Memphis. The event later became known as the $1 Million Quartet. A major victory for the civil rights movement occurred on December 21st, when the Montgomery bus boycott officially ended, after the Supreme Court ruled segregated public buses unconstitutional. Martin Luther King Jr., along with other activists, rode integrated buses that day, marking significant progress for equal rights. The United States had grown to nearly 171 million people by 1957. The economy was booming, but beneath the prosperity, the Cold War was intensifying as the space race officially began. 1957 was an important year, with so many memorable events that shaped history, pop culture, and American business. On January 16th, Marriott opened its first hotel, the Marriott Motor Hotel in Arlington, Virginia. What began as a single roadside motel would eventually grow into one of the world's largest hotel chains. January 20th marked President Eisenhower's second inauguration as President of the United States. Eisenhower remained one of the most popular presidents of the post-war era. Tragedy struck on January 23rd, when truck driver Willie Edwards Jr. was kidnapped by members of the Ku Klux Klan in Alabama. He was forced at gunpoint to jump from a bridge into the Alabama River, where he drowned. The crime became one of many racially motivated killings during the Civil Rights era, although justice would not come until decades later. Also on January 23rd, employees at Wham-O produced the first plastic flying discs that would soon become famous as the Frisbee. The simple toy evolved into one of America's most recognizable recreational products and eventually inspired competitive sports. Disaster unfolded over Southern California on January 31st, when a United Airlines flight collided mid-air with an Air Force fighter jet above the San Fernando Valley. The wreckage fell onto a school playground in Pacoima, killing 8 people, including 3 children on the ground. America lost one of its most beloved storytellers on February 10th, when Laura Ingalls Wilder died at age 90 in Mansfield, Missouri. She passed away from complications related to diabetes and heart disease, leaving behind the beloved Little House series that introduced generations of readers to frontier life. One of Philadelphia's most haunting mysteries began on February 25th, when the body of an unidentified young boy was discovered in a cardboard box beside a road. For decades, he would simply be known as the Boy in the Box, and it took until 2022 to identify him as Joseph Augustus Zarelli. On March 4th, Standard & Poor's introduced the S&P 500 index, which tracked the top 500 American companies. It would become one of the world's most widely followed measures of stock market performance. Children's literature changed forever on March 12th, when Dr. Seuss's The Cat in the Hat was published. Written using limited vocabulary to encourage beginning readers, the book became an instant classic and remains one of the best-selling children's books ever written. The FBI arrested powerful labor leader Jimmy Hoffa on March 13th, charging him with bribery. Although Hoffa remained a dominant figure in organized labor for years afterward, the arrest marked the beginning of increasing federal scrutiny. On March 26th, a 22-year-old Elvis Presley purchased his mansion, Graceland, for $102,000. The Memphis mansion would become his permanent home and eventually one of America's most visited historic residences. Millions gathered around their televisions on March 31st, as Rodgers and Hammerstein's Cinderella, starring Julie Andrews, aired live in color on CBS. The special reached an estimated 100 million viewers, making it one of the biggest television events of the decade. On May 3rd, the owner of the Brooklyn Dodgers, Walter O'Malley, agreed to move them to Los Angeles. The decision devastated Brooklyn fans while helping launch professional sports on the West Coast. Evangelist Billy Graham began one of the most successful campaigns of his career on May 15th. Opening a crusade at New York's Madison Square Garden before 18,000 people. The revival ultimately lasted 16 weeks and drew more than 2 million attendees. History was made on July 6th when Althea Gibson became the first African American to win the Wimbledon Singles Championship. She later added another win at the US Open that same year, cementing her place among the greatest tennis pioneers. During a speech on August 21st, President Eisenhower announced a 2-year suspension of American nuclear weapons testing, reflecting growing public concern about radioactive fallout, while it also attempted to ease Cold War tensions. The battle over school integration reached a breaking point on September 4th, when the governor of Arkansas ordered the National Guard to block 9 African American students, later known as the Little Rock Nine, from entering Central High School. Another rock and roll star emerged on September 23rd, when Buddy Holly and the Crickets climbed to number 1 with That'll Be the Day. The song became one of the defining records of the early rock era and established Buddy Holly as one of its brightest young stars. On September 24th, 3 weeks after the Little Rock school standoff began, President Eisenhower federalized the Arkansas National Guard and sent soldiers to escort the Little Rock Nine safely into Central High School. Television families welcomed a new favorite on October 4th, when Leave It to Beaver premiered. The wholesome sitcom became one of the defining portrayals of suburban American family life during the 1950s. That same day, October 4th, the Soviet Union stunned the world by launching Sputnik 1, the first artificial satellite to orbit Earth. The achievement officially began the space race and sparked fears that the United States had fallen behind. One of the 20th century's most influential novels was published on October 10th. That's when Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand was introduced to readers. Its philosophy of individualism and free market capitalism would attract both devoted followers and fierce critics. American involvement in Vietnam quietly intensified on October 22nd, when coordinated terrorist bombings in Saigon wounded U.S. military personnel and led to the first American casualties. Although few Americans realized it at the time, this would eventually evolve into the Vietnam War. Japanese automaker Toyota entered the American market on October 31st, exporting the Toyota Crown and Land Cruiser to the United States. Initial sales were modest, but the move laid the foundation for Toyota's future success. Engineering history was made on November 1st, when Michigan's Mackinac Bridge opened to traffic. Stretching nearly 5 miles, it permanently connected Michigan's upper and lower peninsulas. President Eisenhower faced another health scare on November 25th, when he suffered a mild stroke. Although he recovered sufficiently to complete his term, the incident renewed public concern about the health of the nation's commander-in-chief. And finally, as Christmas approached on December 20th, Elvis Presley received his draft notice. Rather than seeking special treatment, because of his fame, he chose to serve, entering the U.S. Army the following year. In 1958, America was racing into the future, as 174 million people watched the space race intensify. From America's first satellite to the creation of NASA, things were changing rapidly. For everyday Americans, this year gave us new options when it came to travel and new ways to pay for it. These are the events of 1958. January 7th brought a major milestone for music when Gibson Guitars received a U.S. patent for its futuristic Flying V electric guitar. Though it sold slowly at first, it would later become one of the most recognizable instruments in rock history, played by artists like Jimi Hendrix. On January 18th, Willie O'Ree became the first African American to play in the National Hockey League, breaking professional hockey's color barrier with the Boston Bruins. The United States successfully launched Explorer 1, America's first artificial satellite, on January 31st. The mission not only marked a major victory in the space race, but also led to the discovery of the Van Allen radiation belts surrounding Earth. On February 28th, a terrible school bus accident occurred near Prestonburg, Kentucky. The school bus was carrying 48 students when it rear-ended a wrecker truck and then plunged into the icy Big Sandy River. 26 students and the bus driver were killed in the accident. March 24th marked the day Elvis Presley traded his guitar for an Army uniform. At the height of his fame, the King of Rock and Roll reported for duty as an ordinary private in the U.S. Army. Less than 2 weeks later, on April 4th, 14-year-old Cheryl Crane, daughter of actress Lana Turner, fatally stabbed mobster Johnny Stompanato while defending her mother during a violent confrontation. Authorities would end up ruling the killing as justifiable homicide. By May 12th, Cold War tensions prompted the United States and Canada to establish the North American Air Defense Command, better known as NORAD, to coordinate the defense of North American airspace. The very next day, May 13th, Vice President Richard Nixon's motorcade came under attack by an anti-American mob in Caracas, Venezuela. His limousine was battered, several aides were injured, and Nixon narrowly escaped serious harm. June 15th saw the opening of the very first Pizza Hut restaurant in Wichita, Kansas. What began as a small pizza shop would eventually become one of the world's largest restaurant chains. A few weeks later, on July 7th, President Eisenhower signed the Alaska Statehood Act, clearing the way for Alaska to officially become America's 49th state the following January. Then, on July 29th, Congress established the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, or NASA, creating the civilian agency that would lead America's efforts to explore space and eventually land astronauts on the moon. President Eisenhower also signed the Federal Aviation Act on August 23rd, creating the Federal Aviation Agency, later renamed the Federal Aviation Administration, or the FAA. This organization oversaw the rapidly expanding world of commercial aviation. On October 1st, American Express introduced its first charge card in the United States and Canada, giving travelers a convenient new way to make purchases without carrying large amounts of cash. Later that month, on October 26th, Pan American World Airways launched the first regularly scheduled transatlantic jet passenger service between New York and Paris, ushering in a new era of faster international air travel. Just 2 days later, on October 28th, Cardinal Angelo Giuseppe Roncalli was elected Pope, taking the name John XXIII. His papacy would soon bring sweeping changes to the Catholic Church. November 20th marked the founding of Muppets, Inc. by Jim Henson, laying the foundation for some of the most beloved characters in television history. December 1st saw a devastating fire rip through Our Lady of the Angels School in Chicago. The fire claimed the lives of 90 students and 3 nuns, leading to major improvements in school fire safety. Also on December 1st, Liberty Records released The Chipmunk Song, which quickly became one of the biggest Christmas hits ever recorded. As Christmas approached on December 19th, President Eisenhower delivered the first radio message ever broadcast from space, sending a Christmas greeting to all mankind and expressing America's wish for peace on Earth. And finally, on December 28th, with what many still call the greatest game ever played, the Baltimore Colts defeated the New York Giants 23-17 in sudden death overtime. This game helped launch the league into the national spotlight and made Johnny Unitas a legend. 1959 was a landmark year of growth and change. The 49th and 50th states officially joined the Union. New Mercury astronauts were introduced, and television continued to dominate American homes. As the population rose to 177 million, famous toys and new TV shows made 1959 stand out, but the country spent most of the year mourning the death of 3 young rock and roll stars. Beginning on January 3rd, President Eisenhower signed the proclamation officially admitting Alaska into the Union as the 49th state, making it the largest state in the nation. Just 4 days later, on January 7th, the United States formally recognized Cuba's new provisional government following the overthrow of their dictator. The U.S. was hopeful that their new leader, Fidel Castro, would remain friendly to American interests. January 21st brought sad news from Hollywood when Carl Switzer, best known for playing Alfalfa in the R-Gang comedy shorts, was killed during a dispute at a California home. He was only 31 years old. On February 2nd, the Green Bay Packers hired Vince Lombardi as their head coach. Over the next decade, Lombardi would transform the struggling franchise into one of the greatest dynasties in NFL history. The following day, February 3rd, tragedy shocked the music world when Buddy Holly, Ritchie Valens, and the Big Bopper, J.P. Richardson, were killed in a plane crash near Clear Lake, Iowa. The event would later become immortalized as the day the music died. March 9th introduced us to the Barbie doll. It made its debut at the American Toy Fair in New York City and would become one of the best-selling toys of all time. On April 7th, Oklahoma officially ended statewide prohibition after 51 years, becoming the last former dry state to legalize the sale of liquor. Just 2 days later, on April 9th, NASA unveiled the Mercury 7 astronauts to the American public. The elite group of military test pilots, including John Glenn, Alan Shepard, and Gus Grissom, would become the faces of America's first manned space program. May 4th marked another first when the Recording Academy's inaugural Grammy Awards were announced. Ella Fitzgerald became the first winner for Best Female Vocal Performance for Ella Fitzgerald Sings the Irving Berlin Songbook. On May 8th, the first Little Caesars Pizza restaurant opened in Garden City, Michigan, beginning what would grow into one of the world's largest pizza chains. Summer brought another historic milestone. On August 21st, President Eisenhower signed the proclamation admitting Hawaii into the Union as the 50th state. He also approved the now familiar 50-star American flag, which officially debuted the following Independence Day. September 12th saw the television premiere of Bonanza on NBC. The Western would become one of television's longest-running and most beloved series. Later that month, on September 25th, Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev concluded a historic visit to the United States, with meetings alongside President Eisenhower. Although both leaders expressed hope for easing Cold War tensions, those hopes would collapse less than a year later, after a U-2 spy plane incident. October 2nd introduced viewers to one of television's most influential series, when Rod Serling's The Twilight Zone premiered on CBS. It blended science fiction, suspense, and social commentary in a format unlike anything audiences had ever seen before. On November 15th, Richard Hickok and Perry Smith committed a brutal murder of 4 members of the Clutter family on their Kansas farm. The shocking crime would later inspire Truman Capote's groundbreaking true crime book, In Cold Blood. Just 3 days later, on November 18th, the epic film Ben-Hur, starring Charlton Heston, premiered in New York City. It would go on to win a record 11 Academy Awards, including Best Picture. On December 21st, Tom Landry accepted the head coaching position with the expansion team, the Dallas Cowboys. This began a legendary coaching career that would span 3 decades. Then, on December 23rd, rock and roll pioneer Chuck Berry was indicted on federal charges involving sex with a 14-year-old girl and the transportation of her across state lines to work in his club, which was a violation of the Mann Act. He was found guilty after multiple appeals and even a retrial, and he would serve 1.5 years behind bars. In 1960, America's population had grown to 181 million, and a new decade began with dramatic change. The civil rights movement gained unstoppable momentum, while television and pop culture continued to reshape everyday life. This was also a presidential election year, and Americans were looking to elect the youngest president in history. This is the year 1960. On February 1st, 4 black college freshmen from North Carolina A&T, later known as the Greensboro Four, sat down at a segregated Woolworth lunch counter in Greensboro, North Carolina, refusing to leave after being denied service. This peaceful protest inspired sit-ins across the South and became a major turning point in the civil rights movement. Just 1 week later, on February 8th, construction officially began on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Weeks later, producer Stanley Kramer would receive the first permanent star on Hollywood Boulevard. The following day, February 9th, brewing executive Adolph Coors III disappeared while driving to work in Colorado. This prompted one of the FBI's largest manhunts of the era. Authorities eventually discovered he had been shot to death after an attempted abduction for ransom. Because 1960 was a leap year, February 29th saw the opening of the very first Playboy Club in Chicago, introducing the now famous Playboy Bunnies. On March 4th, Lucille Ball filed for divorce from Desi Arnaz after nearly 20 years of marriage. Their split marked the end of one of Hollywood's most successful personal and professional partnerships. April 14th marked the official incorporation of Motown Records in Detroit by Berry Gordy Jr. Over the coming decade, Motown would introduce artists like The Supremes, Marvin Gaye, The Temptations, and the Jackson 5, forever changing American music. The Cold War took a dangerous turn on May 1st, when an American U-2 spy plane, piloted by Francis Gary Powers, was shot down over the Soviet Union. The incident embarrassed the Eisenhower administration and shattered hopes for improving relations between the two superpowers. Only days later, on May 9th, the Food and Drug Administration approved the world's first commercially available birth control pill. The decision would have profound effects on family planning, women's health, and American society. Disaster struck in the Pacific on May 23rd, when a tsunami, generated by a massive earthquake off the coast of Chile, slammed into Hilo, Hawaii, killing 61 people after traveling thousands of miles across the ocean. Moviegoers lined up on June 16th for the premiere of Alfred Hitchcock's psychological thriller, Psycho. Its shocking twists, unforgettable shower scene, and innovative storytelling would make it one of the most influential films ever made. On July 11th, author Harper Lee published her first novel, To Kill a Mockingbird. The story quickly became a bestseller and remains one of America's most celebrated novels. Just 2 days later, on July 13th, Senator John F. Kennedy secured the Democratic nomination for president at the party's convention in Los Angeles. The following day, he selected Lyndon B. Johnson as his running mate. By July 15th, Chubby Checker released his version of The Twist, a song that would shoot to #1 and spark a nationwide dance craze unlike anything America had seen before. On August 19th, captured U-2 pilot Francis Gary Powers was convicted of espionage in the Soviet Union and sentenced to prison and hard labor. He would later be exchanged in one of the Cold War's most famous spy swaps. September 2nd brought an unforgettable Olympic performance by sprinter Wilma Rudolph, who captured the first of her 3 gold medals at the Rome Olympics. She became the fastest woman in the world and an inspiration to millions. Only 3 days later, on September 5th, Cassius Clay, later known as Muhammad Ali, won the Olympic gold medal in light heavyweight boxing, launching one of the greatest careers in sports history. Television changed presidential politics forever on September 26, when John F. Kennedy and Richard Nixon faced each other in the first nationally televised presidential debates. Millions of Americans watched, and the broadcast demonstrated the growing power of television in shaping public opinion. On September 30th, The Flintstones, the first primetime animated sitcom, premiered on ABC. Created by Hanna-Barbera, the show would become a financial success, lasting far beyond its original 6 seasons. Also on September 30th, kids show Howdy Doody aired its final episode. In an emotional farewell, the normally silent Clarabelle the Clown spoke his first and only words, "Goodbye, kids." Election Day arrived on November 8th, when John F. Kennedy, at just 43 years old, narrowly defeated Vice President Richard Nixon to become the youngest man ever elected President of the United States. He was also the nation's first Catholic president. A new pizza chain was born on December 9th, when the first Domino's Pizza store opened in Ypsilanti, Michigan. From its humble beginnings, it would grow into one of the world's largest pizza delivery companies. The year ended with tragedy on December 16th, when 2 commercial airliners collided over New York City, killing 134 people in the air and on the ground. It remains one of the deadliest aviation disasters ever to occur over a major American city. Recollection Road and LEGACYBOX both believe it's important to preserve the past. If you're like me, there's a box of your family's treasured home movies and photos tucked away somewhere, and LEGACYBOX can help you preserve them digitally. The process is a simple and safe solution for converting your home movies and photos to thumb drive or to the cloud. Just send in your LEGACYBOX filled with old VHS and camcorder tapes, film reels, and pictures, and get back digital copies that can be easily enjoyed, shared, and kept organized. It's that easy. LEGACYBOX is trusted by over 1 million people, and it's all done right here in the USA. Get started preserving your past today. Go to LEGACYBOX.com/recollection to get an incredible 55% off. Buy today to take advantage of this exclusive offer and send in your memories when you're ready. Go to LEGACYBOX.com/recollection to save 55% while supplies last. Let me know in the comments if I missed anything, and make sure to check the description of this video for links to pick up a t-shirt. Thank you to our loyal Patreon supporters listed here. Visit patreon.com/recollectionroad to join the club.